Well, welcome everybody. We're glad that you could join us today for TCCA 2020. And my name is Kimberly Aceto-Tannick, and I will be hosting this session. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. My co-host, Carrie, will help me monitor the chat, and we will provide options or opportunities for a discussion at the end of the session. And so on to our featured presenter. It is my pleasure to introduce to you John Meehan.
Hey everybody, I'm excited to join you today. Hi in Texas, howdy wherever you guys are dialing in from. I hope you're staying safe and staying healthy. And if you joined my last session, I hope I don't repeat too many of the same jokes. So I appreciate you taking some time today to dial in and hang out. Thank you for taking some time. I know that teachers hate it when we waste their time and waste their money. So my goal as a speaker and as a presenter is to do neither of those things today. If you need anything today from today's presentation, I have a website. It's EDrenalineRush.com. It's also on the t-shirt, and it's also the name of my book, which is all about game-changing student engagement inspired by theme parks, mud runs, and escape rooms. I like to get messy, both in the classroom and outside of it. That energy, I think, really is a way to kind of connect with kids. I said it before COVID that I think that enthusiasm really is infectious. And I think that just as much as we can spread bad things by being in close contact with one another, we can spread incredible energy to our learners if we are on fire for the work that we do. So I'm on fire for the work that I do. I love it. I talk quickly. I have a lot to cover today. If you want to get a hold of me afterwards, there I am on Twitter, John Meehan. I'm at Meehan EDU, and I will gladly hang out and talk with you about anything related to teaching. But I have so much to cover today. I want to dive right in. So let's do it. Talk about Adrenaline Rush, all about game-changing student engagement. And today I wanted to divide today's presentation into 3 different parts. Talking about the first part, we deal with long lines and overpriced motion sickness. The second part, we talk about manual outdoor labor and forced physical trauma. And finally, if we have enough time, we'll talk about psychological pressure and mounting anxiety. Now, if I framed my presentation today about these 3 things, I don't know if I would have people dialing in and asking me to come to Texas to talk about it. But if you take these things and put a creative twist on it, long lines and overpriced motion sickness is a fancy way of saying what they do at theme parks. Manual labor and outdoor trauma that's physical in nature, I pay somebody else to do their yard work when I go on a mud run. And if I'm really lucky, or if I'm really happy, I take all of that pressure and that mounting anxiety and I spend my nights or my weekends doing something like an escape room. Now, maybe you've never done a physical escape room. That's no problem. You probably played a video game or 2. You're paying good money in each of these situations to put the stress in your hands. And that's crazy because we spend tons of money in our life trying to look for ways to de-stress. So how can we capture that energy, that excitement, that enthusiasm in our classrooms? I think one of the biggest answers is, and I'm going to put on the closed captions here so I can be more accessible in my presentation, because good games really are welcoming. They are accessible. There's a book in 1978, a researcher named Bernard Suits, and he says that what all games share in common is that playing a game is the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. You don't have to go to the theme park. You choose to go to the theme park. You don't have to do the mud run or the Spartan race. You choose to do that. You don't have to play that video game. You don't have to go be locked in that room with the zombies. That was something you signed up for. What's great about games is there is a volition, there is a consent. And if our classes have more consent, then our students have more agency and more joy in the work that they do. Because there's a big difference between distress, which is the word we've all heard before, like, oh my God, I'm freaking out, and what they call eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, eustress, from the Greek word or prefix eu, like we get euphoria. It means literally good stress. There's good stress, the stuff we signed up for, we wanted. There's distress, the pressure, the anxiety. Our goal is to maximize the former and minimize the latter. So how can we get our classes to feel more joyful and excitement and based? There's a great quote in Finland, and I use it in my book, that there's the thing that says, you learn without joy, you will forget easily. I teach high school, and the hardest part about my job is I teach students who don't love the stuff that I love nearly as much as I love the stuff way more than they do. That's part of being a teacher, right? You love math, you love science, you love history. Students don't love it as much as you do, but you need to get them to love it as much as you do in order for them to want to learn it. So what if I tapped into things that they do love, like games, like teams, like sports, like technology, like interacting, like competition, like collaboration, like playful learning, like playing with toys? They're kids. Everyone says, well, you're going to need this in the real world. For these kids who are kids, whether they're high school kids or elementary school kids, middle school kids, this is a part of how they learn. Fred Rogers famously said that play is the work of childhood, There's something about the work that kids do that is innately curious, innately awe-inspiring, innately wondrous. To have faith like a child, to just try stuff, to imagine, to laugh together, to come together with people who are different than you. In this bottom picture, you see these two students laughing together. One of them is a varsity baseball player who's been scouted to play in Major League Baseball. The other one's a theater kid. High school is still very cliquey, but to put those students from different cliques together and have them laughing and being vulnerable with one another, there's a joy that says, even after this class is over, I kind of love this. I can't wait to come back tomorrow. This is the type of thing for social emotional learning that helps the medicine go down easier because you don't feel like you're doing it alone. And I love putting opportunities in my classroom where students can feel like they're a part of a team. We're talking about theme parks or mud runs or escape rooms. Dave Burgess, who wrote the book Teach Like a Pirate and who published my book, I'm very grateful for that. He said in his book, do you have any lessons that you could sell tickets for? He sincerely believes there are days that he could have a cash register outside of his door and students would actually pay a small sum of money to come in. When I teach my classes in a private Catholic school in Northern Virginia, each class runs for about 45 minutes and they have 7 periods a day. There's 180 days in the school year, and our class or school tuition is something like $14,000 or $15,000 a year. That means that each class that I am teaching is worth about $12 to $13 every single day. That's what the ticket to my class would be on that day. If you're doing it with tax dollars, it breaks out usually about the same, between $10 and $20 for your class per day. Is your lecture today worth $17? Is your PowerPoint worth $15? If you're watching an excerpt of a movie or a full movie, and it takes 3 classes to watch all of The Great Gatsby, is that worth $45 worth of your students' time? And if you put yourself in that headspace, Burgess says, put another way, if students had to come to school but didn't have to come to your classroom, would you be teaching to an empty space? Would they be going to another ride in that theme park with a longer line? Is there something more engaging and exciting about some other space? And if we only have 180 days to be with them, how can we have our classes feel more engaged and inspiring? Those ticket-worthy lessons where a student says, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I can't wait to get on this ride. That is what I want my class to feel like every single day. Now, before COVID, I led trainings all over the US, and I still do go and give presentations in schools virtually here like I'm doing in Texas. I was giving a challenge presentation one day where I said, hey, let's take a worksheet and cut it into strips. And take those strips and put them into plastic Easter eggs where they have numbered problems. We'll hide those slips in the eggs. We'll put all the eggs in a bucket in the center of the room, and then we'll have students divided into teams. Each team would send one representative up, grab an egg, take it back to their desk group, and solve that numbered problem. Then when they were done, they'd lock it back up, rinse and repeat. How many eggs could you get solved over the course of the 3 to 5 minute timer, whatever it is? It's like a relay race. But because ableism is uncool, there's no running, and as you grab an egg, you take it back to your desk group. Some of those problems are harder problems than other problems. By the end of the game, there's a secret point value for maybe the problem 7 or problem 14 because they were the harder problems. It's not about who can do it the fastest. It's about who can solve the answer and put the work in. I posted it up online and didn't think much of it. Overnight, that video of me giving that training to a bunch of adult educators picked up 10,000 views. In a month, it had 75,000 views. And I started to see inspiration videos that use that same pedagogy, inspired by what I had posted up and I had called the hashtag egg-challenge. Egg-challenge, rinse and repeat. Have students grab a question, take it back to the desk, solve it. I saw high schoolers, I saw kindergartners, I saw people in different countries and different languages playing this game because there's something about play that's very universal. There's something that we don't take ourselves so seriously, but hey, this is some serious business, this learning stuff. So let's do it together. And I saw all sorts of variants. In a month, they picked up 75,000 video hits. There were people who did it in 40 different states in the US and 10 different countries throughout the world. That to me says that's the lesson that people would pay money for. And that's just a dopey low-level review activity. If I can get students engaged in grab an answer, you think you got it right? Grab another question. You think you got it right? And another, how many questions can you solve or answer for the course of that 40 minutes or that 50 minutes? Well, then that would be a money well spent lesson. So can I use that same pedagogy through my classroom? And I'll talk about ways that I adapt that today. Talking about games, there is a bunch of science in how games are designed. They spend a bunch of money to figure out what makes them addictive. Here's a test for you that I borrowed from an engineer. His name is Mark Rober. And this is from a TED Talk he gave about tricking our brain into learning more. If I give you a test on the right-hand side, I need you to push button 3 for 5 seconds, then button 6 for 1 second, and then button 3 and 5 for 6 seconds together, et cetera, et cetera. How much would I have to pay you to take that test? My guess is that price point would be pretty high because it looks boring. Oh, and by the way, this test is like an 87-page test, and you're not allowed to take page 2 until you've gotten level page 1 100% complete. How much would I have to pay you to take it? He says, well, what if I rethought it and just sort of rejiggered it? Maybe instead of calling it a test, I called it a game. Now, Would you like to get to level 2 of this game or level 3 of this game? To do it, you have to then solve the stuff on page 1, and so on and so forth. Now, there's still not a great game to be had here. He says, but maybe you take this and just present it in a slightly different way. Maybe instead of giving a piece of paper vertically, you turn it sideways. Present it in an unconventional way. How much more would you be at least curious about this if the game was now cut up into strips or put in different locations in the classroom? There's a curiosity, a novelty that makes us say, all right, I'll give this a shot. And then those buttons, I made them disappear and I put them into different locations. Maybe I took those buttons and I gave them, instead of numbers, I gave them a different coat of paint. Same game, same test, right? You can't get to level 2 before you've gotten all of level 1 100% complete. And instead of written prompts, now I give you visual prompts. Ask it the same question. How much would I have to pay you to take this test? Or better yet, how much would you pay me? For the last 40 years, people have paid a lot of money to play video games because video games get harder as you play them. Level 3 work is naturally harder than level 2, which is naturally harder than level 1. And yet people are really excited to fail forward in video games, to take a risk, to try it, to trick themselves into learning more. There's a great bit of research about how games work dating way back to antiquity. And there's a philosopher named Joseph Pieper, who's not talking about video games. He talks about a book called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. Pieper was a mid-20th century philosopher who is now dead. And he researches the work of St. Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle well before that. So we're talking about thousands of years worth of learning. He says in his book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, what I love, and I quoted in my book, leisure in Greek is the word skole, and in Latin it's the word scala, the English word school. Quite literally, the word we use to designate the place where we educate and teach children is derived from the word that at its origin means leisure. This isn't video games what tricked us into learning. This is learning itself was supposed to have been playful in its very DNA. In the workaday world, we had to do X. But in the scholarship world, we got to, we chose to, we had volition. And if that choice, that voice, that autonomy is what draws people to playing games, makes them want to try and to fail and then to try and try again. Video games just do it really, really well, faster because they're based in computer land. But there's no reason why our classrooms can't deliver that same playful engagement cycle of try, fail, try again. Talking about games and their failure rates, there's a great book called The Game Believes in You by a man named Greg Topo, who was the national K-12 educator reporter for USA Today for about 20 years. He then went on to be the managing editor at Inside Higher Ed. So he knows his stuff in learning. It's not just some fly-by-night guy who's playing a Jeopardy game in his classroom. And it's fine if you use Jeopardy in your classroom, God bless you. But I find that I spend so much time building that stupid game, and then the students tune out in like the first 30 seconds, that the average kid ends up just sitting on their hands and then waiting for everyone else to do the answers. So that idea of a playful game-based classroom is not just teach, one day of review game, and then the test. Rather, it's what if we take the science of how games work and pull it into every lesson that we are doing. So there's a playful element, there's an engaging element, there's a trial and error element, and they're hazarding guesses, and they're failing forward. And digital play is making our kids smarter. It's tricking us into doing a lot more work. Topo says when they build video games, they have a sweet spot for failure. If the game's too easy, people won't play it. But if the game's too frustratingly hard, they would walk away and never come back, and it wouldn't sell any copies or make any money. He says when they design games in old school difficulty, they want them to be hard, but not too hard, because they were designed to steal our money. So they want you to get just so close. Oh man, if only I had one more life, one more man, one more go of it. In fact, when they build these video games, the intended rate of failure, they want you to fail when you play a video game 80% of the time when you play it. And that's wild. Because in class, if a child gets one math problem right, the child throws their hands up and says, I am not a math person, that's it, I quit. And yet they go home and they play Fortnite for hours, or they'll play Among Us for hours, or League of Legends, or Mario Kart for hours. And then they'll watch videos of students online also playing, and they'll watch Twitch streams of people doing the same thing. And they'll want to get better, even though the failure rate is exorbitantly higher by compared to what it would be in a traditional classroom. So how is that, and why is that? I think, and this is my theory, I can't prove it, but I do think the reason what games do so well is they offer environments that it's safe to fail. Rather than telling a child, you tried it, you failed, you're a failure, now you're going to be on a low track, now you're never going to get into college, you're never going to get a good job. They make it safe to fail. They say that failure is part of the game. And I use this acronym in my book, and I use it in my lesson design too, because what video games and good games do is offer the chance to deliver and receive specific, actionable feedback expediently. SAFE. Specific, actionable feedback right there on the spot. If you're playing the piano and you hit a wrong note, you hit the wrong button, it literally gives you the ear cue that you were incorrect, like the game assignment. If you push the blue button, you were supposed to put the green button, it goes whomp, and you hear the sound, and you know in that moment, oops, did it wrong. I get to try it again. Like the game Bop It, like the piano, like Mario Brothers. You run left to right, and you fall down a hole. You don't have to wait 3 weeks to get an essay back to find out that you died 3 weeks ago. It tells you right there on the fly, you died. Do you want to try again? Next time you get to that hole, what are you going to do? You're going to hit the jump button. Specific actionable feedback right there on the fly. And games are so good at saying, it's okay if you made a mistake. Try it again. Fail forward. Learn from these mistakes. Let's iterate. Let's go. Right back in it. Give yourself that buck up talk and get back in the game. So how can we do that in our classroom? Talking about specific actionable feedback expediently. This goes to the research of a Hungarian-American psychologist whose name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He talks about what he calls the flow state. In positive psychology, this is the idea that you can get in the zone, a mental state when you feel fully immersed and fully energized, fully involved, fully enjoying, you're fully relaxed in that spot. If a game is too easy, then you don't hit that flow state. You hit the boredom state or the apathy state. You are too skilled, that game is too low level. But if you are not skilled enough and that game is too hard, you walk in feeling worried or you feel anxious. What good games do is they calibrate that the difficulty constantly is escalating as your skill level is progressing. And traditional school doesn't do that. We just take a student and say, for 180 days, you are in this class because your chronological age is the same as the child next to you, give or take 6 months. Unless you were born on the wrong side of the birth date divide. And then because arbitrarily we're just going to put you in another group, we'll just do that. It doesn't make sense. Different students learn in different ways and different days. And the challenges should get harder based on the quality of the work the child's turning in, not based on the time of the year where they're expected arbitrarily, especially in a COVID model, to get smarter because this is the time where all students are supposed to be smart, like a magic fairy has come in and dropped the pixie dust on them. So what we learn about dangling carrots is that they don't work. In Dan Pink's book, Drive, he talks about the surprising truth about what motivates us. He says carrots and sticks are passé. You don't say everyone gets to the mark and then we all win together. Rather, you talk about intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic, they either don't fear your stick or they don't hunger for your carrot. Intrinsic motivation asks them, so what are you hungry for? What do you care about? And it moves people because of 3 reasons. They seek autonomy, they crave mastery, and they desire purpose. Traditional homework doesn't work. Why? Because not every student needs to do that homework. And even if they do that homework, it doesn't mean they're actually going to do any better on that test. I can tell me to go and shoot baskets for 5 hours. Doesn't mean I'm playing in the NBA tomorrow. Just because I put 5 hours worth of work in doesn't mean I'm qualified for that next level of play. There's no autonomy to that. Likewise, if there's no mastery, a child will just copy the work of their friends so they can get the grade. But when they focus on the grade, the learning itself is what suffers. There is no purpose to the work that they are doing. They are just doing it, quote, to get that grade in the book. And they've learned how to game that system. They'll do 10 nights of homework for 10 points each night, get 100 points in the bank, get to your big test that they've copied for the entire 2 weeks, get to that test, do really poorly, get a 60%, and they'll say, well, you got the homeworks done. You just need to study harder, Billy. Keep at it. You got a 60% for the test, 100% for your homework. We'll average that out and we'll give you an 80%. We can move on to unit number 2 because we have marking period and it's the new semester, or it's the new quarter, and we're off to the next unit. The truth is that child has a false positive, has a 60% mastery, and that's what that child knows. But because the books were cooked, they've gamed that system and they know they can get a B- for doing no learning and will rinse and repeat it every 3 weeks. Especially in a COVID model, that leaves the rich get richer and the poor get lost in the weeds. We have to have classes that have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. In the next 20 minutes, I hope to give you examples from my classroom about things that we have, and I'll divide the presentation accordingly. Autonomy. Talk about autonomy in our classrooms. If you've ever played the Mario Brothers Mario Kart game, you probably have your favorite racer. Maybe you're a Wario guy, or you're yeah, wahoo, right? You love Mario. There's no functional difference between Mario and Luigi in that game, truly. If you ever played Monopoly, there's no functional difference between having the dog and having the top hat or having the wheelbarrow or the thimble. But we all have our piece, and that simple act of choosing a piece lets the game know that we have had a fundamental difference because I showed up. A little bit in the way that I have chosen to put my mark on it. I now have a little bit of say in how this game unfolds. I wait my turn, I see my progress, I move my pieces, etc. Our goal in our classrooms is to have a little bit of autonomy to get a lot of buy-in from our kids. So from the first day of my classroom, we have 200 years or 400 years of American literature to cover in a year. It's insane. It's too much. It's a chronology of America from the first persons in the United States, our BIPOC persons, all the way up and through people of today. And we're talking about 400 years of content. Too much. It's a survey, and you can't possibly spend enough time on any one thing. So rather than trying to teach everything, I took my entire class year and I said, well, what if it was themed around a year-long chase for this great American dream? If we're searching for this great American dream, who has the dream in any given unit? Who stole the dream? Who took the dream? Who is possessing or defending or protecting the dream? And then in each unit, we're just going to follow that as if it's a singular thread. Our brain is hardwired for story. When you go to Walt Disney World, as an example, and you get in line in the Pirates of the Caribbean, you're literally just sitting on a boat that's on a track, floating in an 8-minute loop, and rinse and repeating with outdated bad animatronics making some noises as you kind of go through to hide the fact that you're in a dark warehouse. That's the game. But they've dressed it up with the theming, right? The sights and sounds and smells, the things that you can almost spray the water and touch, and then have this feeling of exhilaration and thrill that you start to believe, the suspension of disbelief, because you're in a world where ... So I took my class that was a year-long study of the American dream, and each unit is now a 3-week kind of mini journey where my students now see themselves as adventurers or explorers or discoverers or finders or historians or protectors of a particular concept. So when we go through our first unit about Ernest Hemingway, as an example, now they become protectors and defenders on the front lines of a battlefield. And they're expected to find information to help protect and defend. Who they protect and defend, that's up to them. But they have choice, they have autonomy, they have voice. Finding evidence from the stories to dig deep and see if they can find clues or stories about why these stories came out the way they did. When we get to the mighty Mississippi and study Huckleberry Finn, we're looking for examples of social justice or social pressures. They use Twitter and social media to make notes on these stories so that for 3 weeks, we're just playing in the waters and saying, "Ooh, what else could you find? Could you tweet that? Could you shape that? Could you push that out and have other people find what you are finding?" So they start to see themselves as collectors, as curators, as players in this game, where it's not like Mr. Meehan just reads them the lyrics or reads them the words or reads them the math problems down the line. Rather, it's, I present you in a world where ... I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm not the guide on the side. I've become an impresario with a scenario. Hey guys, we're in a world where, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff in the water. What do you want to dig for? What do you want to look for? What can we find together? If we're racing for this great American dream, then, on the first day of class, I want them engaged and inspired. And I've done this in a virtual environment as well. Hey guys, come on in, dial into the Zoom chat. We have 90 minutes on today's call. I need to do a bunch of things all year long. The procedural stuff, the boring stuff. Sign up for text alerts, fill out the About Me survey, give me a short personality quiz, which type of person are you, et cetera, et cetera. If we're blasting off for 400 years of American dream content, why don't we go ahead and arm ourselves for this time travel today? You'll see before you there are 10 different stations in a Google slide. I don't care which slide you work on first. When you think you have it, hit the submit button. Maybe at one station you are, I don't know, filling out a Google form. Maybe at another station, you're submitting a short Flipgrid where I learn how to pronounce your name. I get your pronouns. On the Padlet station, maybe you're getting something where you're sharing your goals for the year or the type of classes you learn best in. You sign up for text alerts, or you fill out a sketch note where you draw a picture of what do you think the best classroom should look like. Give me evidence with words next to your pictures about why you said what you said. That's just getting to know you activities. I don't care in the order in which students do it. The truth is, if we have 90 minutes, they can do any of those things and it's still time well spent. Again, choice and voice and autonomy. But I've created a system whereby micro-credentialing or micro-badging replaces the need for micromanagement. As they solve the thing, check it off the list. Nice work. Maybe at the one station, Bobby has to, I don't know, fill out a Flipgrid. I'll see if Bobby came through, check it off his list. At another station, maybe Sally has this thing, she has to write her goals when she gets to this station with the book icon. Maybe the book is like the prompt is there waiting for her, and it says, what are your goals? But you have to write 2 or 3 sentences. Oh, Mr. Meehan, can I show you my screen? I think I have this one. Nice work, Sally, you're good to go. Cross it off your list, you're moving on. Then Bobby says the next thing, and Janie says, or Tommy says, or Mark says, I have filled out this survey. Nice work, crossing it off, Mark, and moving on. At another station yet, maybe they have to fill out a spider graph here, taking these 6 traits, gaming, speaking, reading, writing, tech, and social skills. Which one are you strongest at? What's your second strongest, the third, the fourth? Our students know how to create a character, or create a player, or create a profile in all of their games that they play. Couldn't they create themselves into the world of my classroom? How much more rich data do I have about the student in the first day of class? Wow, this kid really loves writing. Seems to have struggling issues when it works with technology. Okay, when I build my groups or build my activities later, I know that Sally here would be someone who self-identifies as a really strong writer. How much more empowered would she feel then to be in a group of really strong writers, or to work with those students where she could be like their writing mentor? How much more supported would she be at a level 1 tech to be surrounded by other people who see themselves as similarly emerging, or to work with a mentor who says, hey, I see myself as a level 3 and I love talking. That's a really helpful way to get these students engaged and connected with one another. And it's so much better than just 2 truths and a lie, we go around, we do one awkward icebreaker, and we're on to course content. I can then have in class, if we do it in person or I can do it online, divide them into teams and cross off the list as they're tracking their way through. So I can say, hey guys, there's 20 minutes left in today's class. White team has just crossed 3 items off the list. Green team crossed another item off the list. And there's a great scaffolding and an accordion type mechanic built into this, that if a team is racing way the heck ahead, when they call me over virtually or in person, maybe I put that much more time into reviewing their work product. I ask a few clarifying questions. Oh, you said a sketch note, the class should have nice lighting? What do you mean by nice lighting? It just slows them down just a little bit and it keeps the game close, like a good game of Mario Kart, rather than a game of Monopoly where you get blown out in the first 30 seconds and you wind up hating the people who you're playing with because you realize you can never possibly ever get back in it. That near win, that near miss, that, oh, we're so close, makes us run out of time just as there's 1 or 2 stations left to go. And now the autonomy, mastery, and purpose of homework said, hey guys, we gave you 2 or 3 days to complete every station. We are now done with this activity at the end of today's class. Any stations you did not get done with your team become individual homework. Now there is mastery and purpose to the work we're doing in class. Autonomy, move at your own pace, I don't care, but you can see very quickly everyone had the chance to work together, and now it's fair and equitable that you had other work outstanding for home because you've used your time as you should. You can also take those students who finish early in a pre-COVID time and recognize the work that they're doing in a different way, because we're not teaching content, we're teaching people. We're using this content to get students excited about being readers, writers, speakers, presenters, about being people of empathy, about dignity, about defending the dignity of every human person, seeing the purpose that our class has connection outside of our classroom. And in Doug Limaw's book, Teach Like a Champion, he says, the reward for right answers should always be harder questions. So you're never done learning. When you overcome a challenge, you start looking forward to the next thing. We don't do the breakout EDU box where you get candy if you win, because I'm not here to be your candy man. I'm here to be your educational engager, your inspirer, your provoker, your thought idea space where you're saying, what's possible in here? We don't stop. We always go and we have those next questions right behind them. So if a group was to finish early in an activity like I just spelled out there, I'll give them a box of Legos and I'll say, can you build for me the first scene of The Great Gatsby? Go. Just use Legos to do it. Then take a whole bunch of pictures and post them up in a slide deck about why you built what you built. They're annotating their creations. This is very high-level metacognition for Bloom's taxonomy. They're explaining why they did what they did. When you're playing with Legos, you know you have to find certain pieces, certain sizes. You have to find the green brick. Nope, not the blue, not the blue, not the blue. I need the green. It makes them have a rooting interest, a voting interest to want to see success. And when they start to see success, they start to believe in themselves and then reward themselves with, oh, I picked the green brick because, oh, Mr. Meehan, look on page 111, it said this, and that's why I pulled that stuff through. They love this, and if you don't have access to physical Legos in the classroom, you can use Minecraft in a virtual classroom. Hey, you've completed all of our irregular work. Can you build for me DNA molecules using Minecraft space? How much will those kids be excited about that stuff? Use CoSpace's EDU and say, can you build for me a virtual library or art steps, and just do a virtual walkthrough of what would it look like if we had the 2 or 3 biggest items from this museum exhibit of a unit that we just studied posted on the walls. What would the Pythagorean theorem look like if diagrammed as a sports play? Letting our students just be creative and wondrous and engaging and excited. You could even use story cubes. There's an individual in-person versions. I love them. I use them all the time in the physical classroom. And in a virtual learning environment, there's an app you can download. It's totally free. And then you can buy each of these themed decks. I think they're like $2 or $3 a piece. But it's a deck of random emojis. And you take them and you shuffle that deck by rolling these dice. And when you roll them out, now you have to tell a story by incorporating a fish and a tree and a magnet and a foot, whatever comes up on the dice. Could you do that with just giving the students emojis and say, hey guys, here's 7 emojis. Work them into a recap of what we learned from last night's reading. How do you tell the story of The Great Gatsby using a cell phone? The story was written in the 1920s. How is it possible to have a cell phone? Students have to think laterally and help one another and say, well, cell phones are used to like share your social status. Maybe The Great Gatsby is like a cell phone because ... He's trying to get people, to come to his parties. He's trying to hit up people to call them, but like have a curated version of himself. Maybe there's a fish in here because he's acting a little fishy, or there's a bumblebee because he was stung by the love bug of, his old long lost flame of this woman who he met 5 years ago, Daisy Buchanan. Whatever the answers are, students are excited to lean in and be creative and give them opportunity to work with one another and check with one another so they can feel that autonomy. I don't know how you're going to work in the dice or work in the tree or work in the map or work in the monster or the shooting star. I want you to tell me, how did you fit, what you fit? Very, very high level taxonomy. And it's great for students in the elementary schools all the way up to the high schools and beyond it. Talking about autonomy, when I'll do a unit study, I'll make a themed thing feel like an adventure through, like I said, 3 weeks where you become players in the world of. I teach American literature, so I just steal my themes based on the books that I'm reading. This is the Scarlet Letter, and if you just look at this slide right in front of you, hopefully it feels a little spooky. I want it to. I picked this logo in the bottom that was almost demonic, but that's really the logo for a multi-sided dice, like a polyhedral dice that you would have in a role-playing game. And I was like, well, my students are watching Stranger Things. I want my Scarlet Letter unit to feel like we're in an upside-down world because they're learning about the Puritans. They're learning about these times about bullying and oppression and treating people weirdly because they came from different backgrounds and thinking that the devil is living just out there in the woods. Something wicked this way comes. Isn't that not unlike Stranger Things, which my students care about? Tapping into what they cared about, okay, I'll turn it into a role-playing game. For 3 weeks, guys, we're going to turn the Scarlet Letter into a role-playing game like so. They'll come into class and they'll have this slide up. There'll be spooky music playing in the background, and a student will be called on to go ahead and read the slide. You find yourself in the unfamiliar landscape of colonial Boston, standing amid a crowd of serious-faced Puritans. The year is 1642, and a terrible scandal is running rampant through this deeply religious society. There's a married woman named Hester Prynne who's on the scaffold with a baby, but that baby is not her husband's, and she won't say who is her fellow sinner. Confer with your teammates to determine the best course of action. This is Dungeons and Dragons 101, right? Like you walk in the woods, you see a thing. Do you do A? Do you do B? Do you do C? I don't know what they're going to pick, and in truth, I don't really care, but I want them to defend why they said what they said. So I've recapped that much of the plot to see what students now have to say about it. Would you do the easy thing? Join the conversation. This woman's a sinner and she deserved to be shamed. That's what most of the people in the book did. Would you do the medium thing? I probably shouldn't say anything. This can escalate quickly. Stay quiet and you'll avoid trouble. Or would you do the hard thing? Speak out against this injustice. This is an outrage. A woman's private life is not your business. They'll take a moment. They'll strategize with their teammates. Maybe I'll divide them into teams in the beginning. There's the red team, the blue team, the white team, and the green team. Then they make their case and they say, okay, on behalf of white team, we choose medium. Or green team chooses easy. Or black team chooses hard. Whichever. I don't care. When they've made their decision, they scan that QR code or they click on that link, and there's a different question prompt as the reward based on the door that they've chosen to open. Again, with risk comes reward. If you pick the easy thing, there's a lot of text evidence to bear that out, and I wouldn't blame you because in the book, a lot of people did that easy thing. Can you give me 300 characters or so about why you said what you said? The Google form will do all the work for you. It's length validated that you won't be able to submit it until you put in 300 characters. Easy peasy, rinse and repeat. Maybe if you pick the hard thing, not a lot of text evidence to suggest anybody in the book did that, but if you in that world would have done differently, great. Can you give me 100 characters about why you would do what you would do there? Any evidence from the book to bear that out? Again, higher risk, higher reward. If I pick the harder question, because the question is harder, I know I picked a hard thing, but I feel confident saying, I picked it, I'm proud of it, I think I can defend it. And then they're awarded or rewarded with a Google form that might be a little bit shorter. Again, the adventure path asks for harder work, but less work, if that makes any sense. And I love that idea of as a writing prompt. That's a great way to start a class discussion. Yes, I gave away what happened in the book last night, but if I spend the first 10 minutes doing that, how much more engaged are students to talk about the book as we move through the day's activities? Once we broke through that activity, we'll finish up 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Every student has written something. We can do an activity in class where I say, all right, guys, now the group that finished first, you get first dibs of station select today, like old school Montessori school. Would you like to build with Legos today? Or would you like to play with story cubes? Maybe do a sketch note or a graphic organizer. You want to just talk to me as the teacher? Whichever station you pick today, you will be in for the remainder of today's class. So pick one that you like. But here's the thing. We have 7 stations from which to choose, and we only have 7 days in this unit, so you never can go back and do the same station twice. So if you did sketch notes today's class, for example, then you might do story cubes tomorrow or a Lego build. All these things are still forcing you to annotate what you found from the book. And we're competing in teams, the red team versus blue versus green. Over the course of the 7 days of the unit, every child will have done 7 different types of annotation, but I don't care the order in which they do them. And I turned it into a slight competition where we're having a ticking clock in the background, and while one team is building with Legos, again, they've chosen it, another group is working with story cubes or filling out graphic organizers or filling out flip grids, whatever that looks like. We'll turn into a big medal ceremony at the end of the day. They turn in their work products, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, guys, thanks so much. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll see who won. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, they go home and I compare the work products A to B to C to D. But this is like whose line is it anyway, where the games are made up and the points don't matter. When you focus on the learning, which is what they're trying to do at a really high level, the grades will come as a natural consequence. If they're just focusing on, well, what do I have to do to get an A? Well, you had to put in 3 items on your sketch note or 3 items on your story cubes. Then what they're going to do is give you just that bare minimum because they don't know what they're competing against, because it's an apples to oranges comparison. While one group is writing questions, another group is doing sketch notes, or another group is finding text evidence, or another group is working on story cubes, or another group is building with Legos. I don't know what is going to be an A-level work on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. But the truth is, at the start of the next class, I say, all right, guys, it was a close race yesterday, but the thing that got the gold medal was, drum roll please, look at the great work that the Team Blue did. Yay. Why did they get an A? If you guys want to see, this is where the bar is right now, and this was A-level work yesterday. But the next level of this game is going to get that much harder. The rising tide lifts all ships, and because students know they're competing and comparing with one another, they deliver higher level work each day throughout the unit because they want to be seen on that winner's platform. They focus on the learning, the grade comes as a natural consequence. They focus on the skill, the grades naturally improve. They focus on the grade, they're going to let those skills and those learning suffer just so they can cheat their way to that first place spot. I don't want to do that. I want to take away the idea of game-based learning from grade-based learning. I don't talk about grades. We're grading ourselves, and it's getting stronger as we go. Seeing ourselves in our units, making a character where you see yourself in the world of, we started the play Alexander Hamilton. I said, all right, guys, if you were living in the time of Hamilton, how would you not throw away your shot? How would you be a person of, like a superhero to change the world in that day? And this one came from a student named Paul. I love he kind of created himself as a Schuyler brother. He says, if I was there, this is what I would have. This is what I work for. This is who I would be. This is the type of person I would cultivate my life to do, to not throw away my shot. I was noticing that he was a great artist, but I zoomed in quickly here on one small detail, and I wanted to sort of zoom it in so you can see on the presentation. He said one of the things he would carry with him would be a hydro flask with some dope stickers. And I realized in this moment, and I work in a very conservative Catholic school in Northern Virginia, that this child was, through the game character, expressing to me that this child was LGBT. And that was the first time this child ever felt comfortable telling an adult that that was his lived experience. I work in a Catholic school, and it's very difficult for students to feel comfortable expressing their sexuality in any form or fashion. How much more am I able to work with a student? And this is not a political statement, it's a personal affirmation. Because I know that this child showed me that empathy, showed me that vulnerability, and say, hey, here's who I am, would he have felt comfortable doing that if we did not create an environment whereby that was a natural, again, impresario with a scenario, in a world where X, who would you be? Letting him be seen and be heard. And then how much more can I reach and validate him and support him so that he can be seen in my classroom? I love the idea of autonomy, helping them back in. You can do it for any course, any content area. If we were doing a study of that same concept in a science class, what would you look like if you were an explorer on a planet? What skills would you need, et cetera, et cetera. Talking about autonomy, I want to talk about mastery and purpose in the 13 minutes we have remaining. So here we go about teaching to mastery. Video games are great at the idea of teaching to mastery. Here's a great old school video game you might remember from your cell phones. Angry Birds. Love Angry Birds. Super easy. If you've never played, I'll teach you how to play right now. You take the bird and you put him in a slingshot. Pull him back and launch. Whee! If you knock down the tower in one shot, they give you 3 gold stars. Hooray! If you knock down the tower in 2 shots, they give you 2 stars. If it takes you 3 shots, they'll give you 1 star. But whether you got 1, 2, or 3 stars, knock down that tower and you earn the right to move to level 2 and so forth and so on. That is until you get to level 20. Once you get to level 20, they say, sorry, in order to get past this gate, you need to have 40 stars or more. If you don't have 40 stars or more, sorry, can't help you out with level 20. So what you need to do is you need to go back in levels of your choosing and level up your skills to, again, master the skills necessary to get to level 21 work. Great video games are like that. They don't give you a pen and pencil test at level 21. They say in order to be at level 21, you need to have this level of skill. Could I use that same activity, that same pedagogy to get my students engaging in something as boring, and I'm going to just say it because it's really hard to do, as writing? Writing is hard. It feels like you're getting a grind. The research is really hard that says that it's easy to assign writing. It's really hard to teach writing. There's research from this book from Sarah Lewis, who's a researcher from Columbia University called The Rise. And they studied the science behind how silver medalists feel in the Olympic Games. Gold and silver and bronze have milliseconds difference between their success and their failure. But almost without fail, silver medalists usually have this look on their face because they know that they missed that platform by just that much. That near win, that almost mastering it, that is actually what inspires things like gambling addiction. Damn it, if I just had one more swing of that bat, one more roll of these dice, I think I could do it. Can I get one more shot? That's what Angry Birds does so well. How can I get my students to put that face on with writing rather than, oh no, another writing assignment? So I took the Angry Birds mentality and I put it into a rubric. This is my rubric for a 5-paragraph essay. the most boring writing assignment you could ever possibly have. It just has a new coat of paint on it. It feels like Indiana Jones. You see here, each of the items that would be in my rubric is now broken down into a small module. In this case, one that says introduction. Introductory paragraph begins by mentioning the full name of the author and title of work. It's now a writer's workshop. We're working in class. You write as much as you want to. When you think you have that thing done to standard, you come over and you check it with me. At which point you either get 1, 2, or 3 stars. In this case, 1, 2, 3, or 4 gemstones. They're collecting gemstones. And the reason why I did 4 is because I think I had a total of 20 different things, 20 times 4 plus the title of the paper. They got 80 points or 100 points. But they're just writing as they get stuff done. Then they're coming up, showing me their laptops. Hey, Mr. Meehan, does this work? Hey, can you check this out? Micro checking, micro credentialing, micro feedback, micro badging, where they can start to see themselves getting 2 or 3 or 4 stars instead of micromanagement. Everyone write their paragraph, pencils down, time's up. I'll just give them 3 to 5 days. While they're working with their rubrics, I'll have in the background music from Indiana Jones playing while the kids are writing. And then as they're earning more points, they'll walk up to the board and mark off how many points they have so far. Their goal is by the end of the unit to get all those points. The more they check in with me, the more feedback they're going to get. Hey, Billy, right now you have 1 star, but you can get to 2 stars. Here's how you can do that. As I get feedback from individual students, I can see that, let's say, Jonathan here is doing really great, racing ahead of the other students. Maybe then when I work with Jonathan, I give him more detailed feedback. Hey, Jonathan, you only have 2 stars here. In order to get that 3rd star, what you'll need to do is look for dangling modifiers and participle phrases. He says, what's that? I say, Jonathan, I'm not allowed to help you with that, but that's what you're going to need to do. The beauty of that is I don't know what that is. I just need Jonathan to slow the heck down a little bit because that's good. I already know he's racing ahead of other students and he can get harder level work to be worked on. Meanwhile, I can give Alex here a little bit of TLC and say, hey, Alex, let's talk about subject-verb agreement because right now that would be his level 1 work. Different students learn in different ways on different days. And to treat every student fairly does not mean you treat every student equally. There's different skills and there's different talents that they're going to bring on every day of classroom, and that's totally okay. Now, how to grade this stuff is a question that's fair. At the end of the unit, I do want to make sure that I've seen every student's work product, but I don't want a pile of stuff on my desk that I haven't seen before. So I've checked in with each student 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 times, and I know when they're done, the type of thing that they were working on, the type of thing they were struggling with. That's great. Here's my rubric. I'll pass it back to them on the left-hand side, traditional rubric. But because I don't hate them, their score for this is 50% from what I found on the rubric and 50% what they can now tell me. Just like they mapped their own strengths at the beginning of the class year, can you map your strengths based on this essay? Filling out this spiderweb rubric that you're crossing onto the grid, what I had for you in your scores. Now make a spiderweb come to life. Hey, connect those dots. 50% of the grade was what I said. Now 50% is to tell me. I'll ask you 3 questions. You filled out this rubric. You have a clear visual representation. Okay. Question 1. If this was an obstacle course, which of the obstacles are you killing right now? You're doing a fantastic job on. Brag about it. Talk. Just write. Go. And I'll ask the questions one at a time so they actually take them seriously. Give them 3 to 5 minutes. Just get some writing done. Good. Okay, question 2. Which of these obstacles is giving you the most trouble? Take a look at your score. That's not Mr. Meehan saying, I want you, Mr. Bart Simpson, to stand on the board and say, I will not throw spitballs at the teacher. That's you writing down, hey, here's where I'm struggling. Here's what I don't understand about it. Metacogniting, helping me understand what your goal is, like working with a coach rather than working with a person who's just barking orders at you. And then question 3 is, okay, so what can I do to help? How do we think we can move forward that would be best of help to you? Now the child has seen his or her own voice in helping to make his or her grade come to life. Hey, I take this part seriously. I'm having a hard time with this one. Going forward, I could use some help with X, Y, and Z. How much more am I able to then help and support that child with the next essay, give the same thing back to them, the same template. Now they can map in a separate color. Now we're talking about seeing signs of growth. This is Carol Dweck. This is mindset. Making a map of your own growth so you start to see yourself as, it's not that Mr. Meehan hates me and that's why I'm doing poorly. It's, oh, I struggle in writing body paragraphs. And then I give this data to their next year's teacher and I say, you see what Johnny can do? This is what Johnny used to do. These are timestamps, like watching the growth chart on your wall. Doing that growth to mastery makes our students feel safer, more supported in our classrooms. And likewise, celebrating the heck out of it when they're seen. Sometimes we're teaching content in classes that is too hard to put game-based learning into, but that doesn't mean we can't use playful elements of teaching in our classrooms. We were reading a short poem by Sylvia Plath. It is a hard poem about mastering the harder parts about psychosexual trauma and abuse. There's actually some Holocaust imagery in here. Wouldn't make a game out of this, would never make a simulation about something like this. But I could roll a bunch of dice and say, add up the number that's on the dice. Use only that number of words. The author left us a secret inside of this poem. This is a confessional poem. I need you to keep just the number of words that you've collected from the dice, black out everything else, and reveal to me the main idea of this poem, which is the letters or the numbers you have left. And then use that blacked out picture to draw for me the image that brings this main idea to life. What did you see? What did you notice? Dig, 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 dig. With no sort of simulation ever, children are now pulling pieces and parts of words. This is what one child, Jared, found for me. The words he had after like maybe 27 words is when he rolled the dice. It says, "Daddy, you lied. I thought my German was obscene. Jew, not pure. Scared of you. God, brute, devil, man. Back, back, back. I'm through. Killed two. You bastard." It chose to have this image of a woman putting a hand on a man, but feeling intimidated with this German imagery. Does that child understand the main idea of this poem? Does he do that much more because he was working for the poem, not for the grade? And how much more excited is he to talk about what he found when he comes to class the next day? This next one, another example of a really dark image, and it looks like this person is asphyxiating. The author herself actually died by suicide, by asphyxiation. There's something about this that echoes that Holocaust imagery, the sense of like confinement and this claustrophobia. That's what the author was writing about. This student sees that and then does research to get me there. I taught nothing, but they're excited about what they found and what they wanted to find from it. Again, the third student, Eliza, talks about the sense of feeling like choked, feeling strangled. We can talk about issues of oppression, about gender roles, about sexuality, about all these dark things. And this poem has all of that, but the students, because they're trying to dig and they're focusing on the learning, they're not so tuned up about what's the right answer. They're experimenting, they're exploring, they're like playing with Legos just in reverse. It's an awesome way you can do with any course, any content area. Give them a page of a book and tell them, give us the main idea of this, give us a piece of the Declaration of Independence, find us something from an online article. I love that teaching to mastery and then celebrating that and sharing that. Then in the end of that week, I'll send a newsletter home to moms, dads, and families that says, "Hey, here's what we did in class this week. Your kids crushed it. Here's who were the leaders in the first game and the second game and the third game. Here's the work products from project A and B and C." And they start sitting up a little straighter and then working a little harder because they see themselves being celebrated in very public ways, elevated and celebrated in the classroom. Does it take time and work? Sure. But now they're not cutting classes. Now they're not copying homework. Now they're saying, "I can't wait to show off what I did to get that gold star to be seen and be celebrated." Talk about autonomy and talk about mastery. How much more does that child feel proud of the work that he or she is doing? I wanted to close with this talk about discovering purpose. I said, autonomy, mastery, and purpose is so critical in any classroom. Let's talk about discovering purpose. My class is American literature. We spend the whole year studying this great American dream. Who has the dream? Who took the dream? Who stole the dream? At the end of the year, we finish with a story by William Faulkner. It's called As I Lay Dying. And we read it in the month of May, which is all about Mental Health Awareness Month. In a Catholic school, we talk about St. Dymphna, the mental health patron saint. And so when we come into class to borrow the language or the theme of mental health awareness, rather than making something exploitative, like a game where they're competing for gold medals, that would not be appropriate, or a simulation where they try to lock somebody in an insane asylum, not appropriate. This book, however, does deal with a character who is dealing with mental decline and a series of family members who are losing and grieving one another as their mother has passed away, trying to make sense of this awful time in American history in the 1920s when this book was written, where the world is starting to unravel and fall apart in this lost generation, trying to make sense of this loss and this trauma without in any way exploiting. So when they come in, as if they were working at a major hospital, they'll scan that QR code like they were scanning their credentials where they're swiping in to scrub in for the hospital work for the day. Then, as small teams, rather than competing for gold, silver, and bronze medal, they're turning in work by competing to become, quote, the director of this hospital. Which of these research teams is the strongest in the research they can provide based on this confidential patient data? Confidential patient data, we are reading, quote, the journals of these patients or the diaries of these patients, which is the chapters of the book, right? In chapter 1, character A is talking about his trauma, his fears, his hopes, etc. Which of the 4 teams has director level work to earn the medical fellowship to become the strongest research team? Not in any way making fun of or blaming or shaming these characters or the individuals who dealt with these real life traumas, but rather helping to understand why we read fake books to understand real matters of the human heart, the human condition. Then, competing for over the course of several days through the unit, working towards stuff, we can learn about anything, up to and including the time in which this book is set. We learn about the history of the asylums in the 1920s and the 19-teens, places where we hoped to send patients away to, quote, get them better. We ended up making things so much worse. So perhaps as one team-based challenge, they'll scan a QR code and learn about the histories of real-life reasons why you could be committed to an insane asylum in the 19-teens and 1920s, right? Talking about purpose. We're reading a fake book to learn a real story of real truth. We've made our best efforts to help and cure people. How did that turn out? Learning from history so we don't repeat history in a negative way, but we can do things to improve and protect and defend that American dream. And then we close our year with this idea of it was the American dream as we set it out. Maybe at the end of the year, that American dream becomes an American nightmare. We set out to protect and defend. We now learned all of this awfulness about what life looks like in this unchecked, just send the crazy people away world. We then close our year before the time of COVID by taking a class trip to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, which is located just about 3.5 hours from my school. It's a National Historic Landmark. It was built to house some 250 patients in 1864. When it was forcibly closed by the United States government in 1994, some 130 years later, it had at its max capacity 2,500 human beings in that same space. We then see that this best attempt to protect and defend this American dream now can go unchecked and could become a nightmare scenario. And because I don't hate my students, I would never give them a test which told them to say, memorize all those dates and times and details. Rather, they're going to build me a website. And they're going to talk about what they learned this year, how we can defend and protect and affirm this human dignity, and how we can protect this American dream going forward. So our marginalized people like Hester Prynne or Huckleberry Finn or Black Lives Matter or people with mental disease or defect can be safer and supported in a more inclusive society that ultimately defends and protects this idea of this American dream, which is what the whole class was about all along. Again, living change so they can see themselves as advocates for it, and they become change agents for generations to come. On behalf of my team at Adrenaline Rush and my family, personally, I want to say thank you for taking some time today to be with me. I'm giving another session at, I think, 2 o'clock about ways we can make similar adaptations, modifications for distance learning. In the meantime, I have all my resources available at adrenalinerush.com. My book is called Adrenaline Rush. I don't think it sucks. If you have a chance to check it out on any of your favorite reading apps, you can read the first couple of chapters for free on Amazon and elsewhere. I do a weekly podcast called Talk to Me in the Car, and I do school-based consulting and education help wherever I can. Hit me up on Twitter. I tell the students I have no life and no friends, and I will gladly talk about teaching at any time. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, stay home. I hope you're testing negative and staying positive. And please let me know how I can help. Hit me up. God bless you. That's it for today, I think.
Well, John, we just had one quick question I do want to share with you. Somebody did ask how you maintain that competitive spirit for a special ed or resource environment where the students have been trained for years, to not try because they haven't been successful. And you did give some good points about how you can do those checkpoints with them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that Henry Ford has a great quote. He says, whether you believe you can or believe you cannot, you are right. And I try in my classes to give 5 yeses for every 1 no, so that the game is only ever slightly getting harder, and you can feel that rubber band starting to stretch. Students on the spectrum, for example, love games with very clear feedback rules. That's not Mr. Meehan being mean. That's not a learned helplessness where I'm in the bad class or I'm in the Red Robins and I'm not a Bluebird high flyer. It's the work you're doing has dignity, and you as a person have value. You're doing different work today. That's okay. If you're doing level 1 work, can you do level 1.1 work? Oh, you can. Okay, how about level 1.2? Oh, nice work. Level 1.3? Not bad. Tell you what, I wasn't going to give you this one, but I think we have enough time. You know what? How about this? Try this level 2 work. Check that out. Let me know if you need anything. That student starts to believe in themselves because they've been told they can do it. I think tracking is a really bad idea. I think APs versus honors versus college prep versus gen ed versus special ed makes students feel like they're on the special class, and they feel like they're fragile or they're broken. There's nothing wrong with you. God doesn't make mistakes. And I'm in a Catholic school tradition, so I affirm that dignity of the human person. I say, you're different. You're awesome. Cool. I have dyslexia, I have dysgraphia, I have dyscalculia, I have ADHD, I deal with anxiety and depression myself. I think I'm kind of awesome. You're awesome too. Let's work together. And I give my students a chance to be seen and to be celebrated in any way that I can, and really just pump them up. So we're not just taking them and putting them into like the steerage class, that segregated thing. It's an awful thing to do.
Well, thank you so much. We've been so fortunate to have you here today and to have you share with us. Just a reminder to our attendees that you will be receiving, if you had registered at the TCCA website, a certificate in your email, and the password for this session to open up your certificate is encourage. It is case sensitive, so you will have to capitalize the E in encourage. So thank you for joining us, and you can catch them again next session.
And if you like it, feel free to make the comments on the Sketch app. If you fill out the survey, it would let me know. Anything I can do to help, I'm all in.